Yes, I've seen that trend for probably the last 4 years, and they want to head south. They want warm weather, and they do seem to want, especially after COVID, they seem to really want to have this well-balanced college life where they're balancing academics with their social life, and it's not all about being super serious and studious and studying all the time.
Welcome to the Mad Rush Podcast. I'm Trisha Addicks, the original sorority rush consultant. While the stories I have to share are nothing short of astonishing, this podcast goes beyond the wild client tales and sorority life. I'll be engaging with fascinating guests from both within and outside the Greek world, uncovering the surprising connections that bind us all together. Join me for a journey that's as entertaining as it is enlightening. Welcome to Mad Rush. So welcome back to Mad Rush. I'm joined today by Nicole Busby, an independent educational consultant. I cannot believe I got that out without... Thank you so much for being here on Mad Rush.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I was going to list all the colleges and universities where you place clients in 2024, but that would take more time than we have today. It's super impressive. Nicole is located in Connecticut and offers a myriad of services, but for our purposes today, I want to learn more about her approach to college placement. In my talks with you, Nicole, it seems that you are really focused on each client individually and their unique needs. That's exactly our business model and what we do, and I think it aligns so well. And every time I've talked to you, I've just been I have these aha moments every time we're talking. I'm like, wait, that's what I feel like. So I was really excited that she was going to be here today, and it sounds like she did her homework.
Yes, I did. I had the privilege of listening to your earlier podcast, and I watched you on Bama Rush, which was the most enlightening documentary I think I've actually ever seen. So unexpected. And I was so emotional, by the way, throughout the whole thing. Yes, I was like teary-eyed. I was like so sad for some of the girls, and I'm sure you could relate to that.
They have a lot of things that happen to them, and it's pretty intense.
It is.
The struggles that they've had. And when I was going through that, especially with Michaela, who was my client, the things that she's been through at her young age were really, really...
It's hard to watch.
Yeah, hard to watch. But anyway, so can you tell me more about what you do? And so why don't you talk about the bathing suit thing you just said? So,
yes. So I loved, I think it was your latest podcast where you ended it with some great tips for young women who are thinking about rushing once they go to college. And I was I think the best piece of advice you gave was to remove the hot bod pics online. And that I think your exact words were, girls in sororities are looking for sisters, not sex partners. So take the sexy pics off. And I thought that was great.
Yeah, and it's also kind of counterintuitive because in this world, everybody is thinking, oh, I've got to look a certain way. And it's not. It's actually very off-putting to people who are looking for sisters and friends. They don't want a girl in a bathing suit. That's not a criteria for friends. And I don't think it ever has been. So like I said, when you and I have talked, I've just been so struck by the similarities between what you do and what we do, or what I do, and the philosophy. And so can you tell me a little bit more about it?
So aside from reducing the stress that families and students often feel around the college admissions process, my purpose is really twofold. So first, it's to help students present their very best selves to college admissions officers. So I advise on course selections, extracurricular engagement.
You're talking about high school course selections?
Yeah, high school course selections, extracurricular engagement, things that kids are really passionate about and want to get involved in, summer programs potentially, standardized test planning, college interviews, and of course, every aspect of the college application. And then the second piece of that is really to find a well-balanced list of colleges where a student is going to thrive academically and socially. So just have a great fit. So it's less about going to a college that is, super selective or most selective and one of the highest ranked colleges on, as deemed by US News World and Report, but really finding a home away from home where that student is going to thrive and grow.
I mean, you literally said I could have put sororities in there and it would be the exact same thing. And I think that you touched on something really important there. Whether the sorority is the quote best sorority, if it's not the best fit for you, you're not going to thrive. And if you try, I would imagine, and I'm putting words in your mouth so you can stop me if I'm wrong, but if someone somehow gets into, I don't know, I'll just say Harvard for lack of a better word, and they're not academically ready for that, or then they're not going to thrive. And it's the same thing with sororities. If you force your way into, you get your grandmother to call get people to call in favors and get you into a certain sorority, and then you get there and it's not a fit, you're not going to find your people, regardless.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like that's very similar, right? Is that
absolutely? And I never really understood when I heard, from some moms whose daughters were rushing, well, the best sorority at this school is X, and the best sorority here is Y. And when I went through Rush myself, I never, ever really thought about sororities that way. What's the best? What's the next level? What's second tier? What's third tier? And I think it's really doing a real disservice to the girls who are rushing. And again, I think this might have been touched upon in Bama Rush, actually. Like, who is coming up with these rankings? And it probably is the boys. And who really cares what they think, honestly?
Well, I think that's very important. The whole top tier, top, middle, and bottom tier, one, that's changed a ton. For instance, now, and I know I touched on this in another episode, but you have to have a really high GPA to be at any school. So the people that especially ones who've had the benefit of you, they've got these amazing resumes. They've done all this extracurricular stuff, and they're very dynamic. Well, there's just not enough space in what would be considered a top tier. There's not enough space for all these amazing girls. So there's a trickle down, and I say trickle down, but I don't really mean down. It's spread out. You cannot have, so let's say like University of Georgia has a top, I don't know, let's say 5. Well, that's 5 times 80. I cannot do that math. So let's just, I don't know, it's less than 500 people. But there are 1,700 people going through Rush. So there are not 1,200 people that are not top tier, if you're going to use that phrase. And so it's so important to keep an open mind, and it's so important to find your fit. And yes, I do get it. I get grandmothers who are calling me, and sometimes moms, especially Southern moms and grandmothers who have had generations that are kind of at the wherever, and they're like, that's the best sorority. That's the one my granddaughter wants to be in. And I cannot tell you how many times the daughter is completely not a fit for that. And so I'm so glad that they have asked us to step in, because we can manage the whole parent expectation, which I believe is a big part of it, and then help the daughter find her best fit. Is that something that you do, manage the parent stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I work with fantastic families, and they know my philosophy. So I don't really have a lot of challenges with families where they're always trying to add a lot more reaches to a student's list. That said, it does happen. Egos of parents sometimes get in the way, and they sometimes will add colleges to their child's list. And these are schools that maybe the student doesn't even necessarily want to go to. And so with time, if there's a good relationship between the student and the parents will realize that this probably isn't the greatest fit. But sometimes it doesn't happen and they'll apply anyway. And 9 times out of 10, the student's not accepted to those schools anyway. So it kind of works itself out.
Yeah, I think that goes to Rush too. I think what's supposed to happen when you're prepared and have an open mind is what's going to happen. And the key there is preparing, and which is what you're doing. You're preparing your clients, students and their families. You're preparing them, and we are preparing for Rush. And whether or not we're the ones doing that, if you're prepared and you have an open mind, it usually works out for the best, in my opinion. So you said you were in a sorority. Where did you go to school? What sorority were you in?
I went to Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, which is just outside of Chicago, and I was a Tri-Delt.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. Very different process back then.
Yeah. It was a different process everywhere. When and if y'all see this video, you will see that she does not look like there was a back then. So talk about connecting. You and I have talked about this before. So once you help them find their best fit, and once they get into the college, where they're going, whether or not it's their first choice, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but talk about what you think is important once they're there.
Oh, once they're there, that is a great question. So I would say first and foremost, get out there and meet as many other students as you can. Don't sit in your room. Girls don't really have this issue, but if you have a young son who will be going to college this upcoming fall, just tell them not to sit in their rooms and playing video games or sitting in your room, scrolling through Instagram. Don't waste your youth, and take some risks and go out and join a club and try to meet people. And it doesn't always need to revolve around the Greek system. It doesn't need to involve drinking per se, but you can get involved in club sports, intramural sports, volunteer organizations. There's so many things that you can do and put yourself out there, especially if you are at a large state university. And you're going to have to find ways to make your community smaller when you're going to a school that has 30,000 students.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. I mean, I want to say there are hundreds, and I don't know every school, but there are hundreds of activities that you can get involved in. And even if you just don't want to be part of a Greek life, it's important to make your school smaller and for you. And doing that is not, like you said, sitting in your room. And there is something for everyone. There is an actual juggling club at I can't remember. I think maybe it's Tulane. I mean, you just stick a dart on a board, and any interest that you have, they're there, and any student union. And so going and finding your people. What I do is help you do that through Greek life, but it doesn't have to be that if that's not something you're interested in. But it is really important once you're there to put yourself out there. And one of my earlier guests, Sabrina, said she owns a boutique, and she talked about going 2 to 3% out of your comfort zone. And I think that's part of learning and part of
I love that.
Getting what you want to out of college. Also, put yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit. It is very easy to stay in your dorm room, even if you think you're connecting, playing a video game with, I don't really understand how it works, but I do think you can have people you play against that are actual people.
Yeah, and try not to. And also, if you have your best friend happens to be going to the same college that you're going to. Do not room with your best friend from high school.
Oh, that's good advice.
Because sometimes kids can start staying like in the very in their comfort zone, as you had mentioned, and they don't really branch out. And before you know it, they're just hanging out with their friend from high school, and they haven't really pushed themselves to meet others, engage in other activities, etc.
Do you see, and I think I definitely see this. So because we're all so connected. Like I always talk about, I have group texts with my friends from college, and I have group texts with, it's so easy to keep in touch with people. Do you think, I see people going to college and then instead of putting themselves out there, all they're doing is texting or Snapchatting or whatever it is with their high school friends. I feel like that isn't, put your phone down and go out and meet people. Because when I went to college, I left for college. My parents dropped me off, or I left, and came back for Thanksgiving, came back for Christmas, and came back at the end of the year. Usually, I went somewhere else for spring break, but those were the only times that I saw my friends. And and we always fell back into it. We always reconnected, and we always ended up, picking up right where we left off. But now there's no opportunity. There's no opportunity. But I think it's so important that you obviously keep those friendships and keep in touch and keep those group texts and all the things that you do. But expanding your horizons is so important. And I think that's good in any way. I when I got married, I married a guy who grew up in Atlanta. We went to Georgia, and then we moved back to Atlanta, and we moved back to Buckhead, which is where he grew up. And all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, these are the same exact people that you've spent your entire life with, because Georgia was pretty much a local college at the time. And I was like, this is not, we have to meet other people. And so we moved to a suburb of Atlanta, which was, people were talking about how they had to pack a snack to come see us, yada, yada. But it was, so then we expanded our world, and I met some of my best friends that way. But I mean, we still are friends with them and we still see them, but it wasn't our entire world.
Right.
So I think that's a very good point that you made, and just putting yourself out there in whatever way that is, while still maintaining your ties, which is, that's also really important. So.
Exactly.
And you talked about the parent dynamic, and I see that. I have also amazing clients, and they have amazing relationships, mother-daughter, grandmother-daughter. But for me, it's having a third party that I think is really helpful in this situation. Do you see the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. I can totally relate. So my two boys who are in college right now, I thought a couple of years ago, well, obviously I'm going to be working with them. They don't need to work with anyone else. And about 2 weeks in, it became extraordinarily evident that I needed to rope in one of my colleagues to work with them. And we could say the exact same thing, but because I genuinely I'm not their mother. With my students, obviously it works, but my colleagues who work with them, it was great, but it's very hard as a parent. It's the same thing, like if you have a fifth grader and they need a math tutor, doesn't mean that you can't tutor your own child, but
I couldn't. Not in fifth grade math. No math, but no, I could not tutor anyone in any math, but continue.
Yeah. But students I just find they're a lot more receptive to a third party, and we can say the same thing that their parents might say, and they're just going to receive it differently.
So speaking of that, what are your biggest pieces of advice that you give your clients, or the things that you work on? I know you listed the things, but what are your challenges, and what do you tell your clients when they're, figuring out where they're going to go?
Yeah. So I would say from a challenge perspective, the biggest challenge is helping students through rejection. there are very few students who are going to come through this process unscathed. And if they apply early decision and they get into their first choice, it's great. But so many students are now applying to big state universities that don't have an early decision option. So they're foregoing that option and they're applying to, 10 or 12 schools, early action, regular decision, and there are going to be some rejections along the way. And a rejection is not a referendum on who they are or their ability to be successful in the future. And so I talked to them about that. But, emotionally, it's difficult for me even because I want for my clients what they want for themselves, and it doesn't always pan out. And as you were saying, a lot of it is just a numbers game. When you're applying to schools with a, 4% acceptance rate, 7% acceptance rate, the majority of those students who apply are going to be denied admission. And that is tough. And I don't think this generation has really had a lot of experience with rejection. And maybe that's, my generation's problem as a parent. There have been a lot of participation awards along the years. And I've seen even at our high school that, anyone can be on the team. They may not play a lot, but there aren't cuts. So whereas I remember applying as or trying out for the cheerleading squad at my high school, and I was convinced that I was going to make it. And I got cut, and I remember getting into my mom's car. I was bawling. My mom was crying. We were so upset. But it all ended up working out for the best. So it's hard. It's hard. Even if students are getting maybe deferred or waitlisted or denied from a school that maybe wasn't even their top choice, it is still hard. So you want to make sure that if you have a rising senior, make sure their list of colleges is well balanced. So typically we want our students to have at least 4 likelies on their list. So that would be where we think their chances of admission is probably greater than 75%. Then maybe 3 or 4 possibles. So it's 50-50 shot. And every student should have some reaches on their list. But you don't want it too top heavy because it can be hard to be getting rejection after rejection. And when you're applying to those schools with single-digit admission rates, it's inevitable that that's going to happen to some students.
And I think it's so valuable that I was biting my tongue because I wanted to interrupt you and be like, same. It's just the whole time you were talking, but it's so valuable to have you to help with that and help them pivot. And that is a huge thing with what we do is, everybody gets cut and you're going to have to cut and you're going to have to pivot, and having someone who knows what they're talking about and knows, okay, you're going to be okay. You've got that. This is going to work out, but this is where, you thought you were going to go here, or you thought you were going to be tried out and you got cut. So now let's look at your current options, and the pivoting is key, but it's hard, and it is rejection, and it's really hard not to take that personally, but it's like you said, a numbers game. It's all part of it. It's hard, but the correlation between literally everything you say, I'm like, well, I think I could record her and then I could go to bed and she could coach people for Rush, and I would just rake in the money. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, you're funny. But I'm sure when you rush, right, you might just not hit it off with one girl. It just wasn't that you're not fantastic, but you just didn't click. And that could be it. Same thing with an admissions officer. There's a lot of burnout in the admissions field. And
really? What do you mean?
They're overwhelmed with the number of applications. And so they're reviewing all of these applications. And if you're getting reviewed at 11 o'clock at night and the reader is tired and wants to go to bed, you may just not get as great of a evaluation as you would if it were first thing in the morning. You just don't know.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
So there's some things that are really out of your control, as well as, of course, with admissions at highly selective universities, institutional priorities. So these are things that students have no control over, but they have priorities. They want they want underrepresented students, minorities. They want students who are going to major in the classics. Maybe they're looking for a trumpet player for the marching band. They need somebody from North Dakota, South Dakota, New Mexico, Alabama, Louisiana. I mean, they want geographic diversity. So, it can be really hard, especially if you're applying to schools where a lot of other students from your high school or geographic region are applying to those same schools.
Yes. So when you see, is there a lot of that? Because I get this. They're like, Georgia, we work with all schools, but Georgia's gotten really tough to get into. Mm-hmm. And I'll get a resume from a client from like a podunk town in South Georgia, and it will not be nearly as fleshed out or dynamic, or the grades weren't, the ACT grades are not as good, but then they'll get in, and then I get the people saying, wait, why didn't I get in? Mm-hmm. This is to college. Mm-hmm. Do you see a lot of that? Like just,
oh, sure.
Random. Cause so what I was saying, I kind of bumbled that, but what I mean is I get these resumes that come across my desk, my clients, and some of them will be from Atlanta, and then some of them will be from, I don't even want to say the names of these towns because I don't even think I would say them correctly, but they're going to the same school, but have wildly different resumes, but I guess it's geographic. That's interesting.
Yes, absolutely. So coming from this part of the country, Wisconsin, Michigan, those are really popular schools. University of Georgia, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, University of Tennessee. Like a lot of students from this area apply to those schools, and the admissions offices, they can't take everyone. They just can't. So
why do you think that is? You've mentioned big state schools a couple times. So it's not like people are trying to go to Harvard and Princeton and Ivy.
They are. Oh yeah, we definitely have those students as well.
But do you see more people wanting to go to these bigger universities?
Yes, I've seen that trend for probably the last 4 years, and they want to head south. They want warm weather, and they do seem to want, especially after COVID, they seem to really want to have this well-balanced college life where they're balancing academics with their social life, and it's not all about being super serious and studious and studying all the time.
Right. And I say that all the time because we have seen a huge influx of clients from, up north and California. And I say that all the time. So what happened, I think, is these kids are sitting on lockdown in New York or wherever, and they're on their phones because that's what you could do. And they're seeing these Southern schools wide open, and they're, having a great time. And they're like, I want a part of that. And then couple that with the GPAs being something that, parents aren't embarrassed, it's not the right word, but they're fine sending their kid to Carolina and there's only one Carolina for those of you South Carolina people. That's not Carolina. University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, but Carolina. But they used to, south of the Mason-Dixon be like, it's not academically rigorous enough. And now it is. And so these kids are, they're seeing this total lifestyle and they want it. And then, like I've said a million times before, the parents are like, okay, you can apply there. And then they get in and then they want to go through Rush. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, how do you do this? And it's tough.
It is. It's very hard. And I've talked to some of my clients after they've gone through Rush, and sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes they, might drop out of the process because they didn't get their top, quote unquote, sorority. But you know what? They made a great choice in the school that they attended because there are so many other things that they can do and get involved in. So, when they were looking at a school, they weren't going to a college where the Greek system basically ruled the social scene, and they knew that going in. So they knew if it doesn't work out, it's okay because I can get involved in so many other activities.
That's so true. And that's, I hope anybody listening realizes that if you don't get into a sorority, then it's important to, like you said earlier, find other activities. Do you find, I have seen this, I didn't used to have to ask people what their GPAs were, you know, when they call me about being a client. I didn't used to have to ask, but this year in particular, because this year's, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. This year, and I've never been wrong, so we can establish that. This year's incoming freshman class were freshmen during COVID. So I find that a lot of people's grades tanked their ninth grade year because they were learning virtually, and a lot of people weren't successful in that. And so then you have to spend the next 3 or 4 years trying to bring that GPA up, which is not always possible. And so we do a lot of grade exception forms and sort of explaining that. And I feel like, I'm jumping around, but I feel like sororities, and I don't know if you see it in colleges, but I feel like they should take that into account with when people want to. So the baseline GPA is usually 3.0, 3.2. But if someone has a 2.9 and you can see a trend that they really tanked during COVID, and then they're moving, then their grades steadily improved, whether or not they brought them up to what's the minimum, I feel like in particular this year, they should look at that. Do you see that too?
Well, it depends. So, I mean, on the common application, there's an additional information section, and they ask you, did COVID affect you or your learning or your family to a degree where you feel like you want to explain that? So there's an opportunity.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there's an opportunity on the application, and it still exists this year and will, I believe, into the 24-25 application cycle. So it gives students an opportunity to explain if COVID had a very negative effect on them, whether, again, it could be health-wise, it could be learning, etc. I saw a lot of students, and I think our practice saw a lot of students with higher grades because of COVID.
Oh, wow.
So,
Were
yes,
they all
but
cheating on their computers?
No, I just
I'm
think,
kidding.
no. But, it's interesting. I mean, the Wall Street Journal had an article a couple of years ago talking about exactly what you mentioned. So kids who were great students, they just checked out, and they weren't even connecting on Zoom to their classes, or they were connecting and hiding their faces on their screen and then just going back to bed. And the parents were working. They assumed that their students were participating in online classes, and then they found out a little too late that they weren't. And so that obviously had a negative effect. But I think overall, our students who we worked with, they tended to get higher grades because there weren't any finals. So when finals oftentimes can bring students' grades down a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. And now there are no finals. And then there were no finals in their sophomore year. So it depends on where you lived in the country. So I had a student at the time. He is now a sophomore in college. Yes, he just finished his freshman year, but he went to a private school in California, and he was completely online for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Whereas here in Connecticut, our students were online really just exclusively in March, April, May, early June. And then that following fall, they went to a hybrid schedule. So they would go to school part of the time, connect via Zoom half the time, and that seemed to work well. And then I believe by that winter, everybody was back full-time in person. But we were really, really lucky, and it depended on, I'm sure if you were in Florida, you probably weren't online half as much as the rest of the country.
Right. And that's what I was saying about the New York people. They were on lockdown for so much longer than we were in the South. So I imagine that's the same thing. Well, yeah, I had no idea that was in the Common App. And I think I'm going to make it my mission to make Panhellenic. I'm serious. Like that's because it's so frustrating to me when I see these people, if they've worked their asses off they had a bad year, but then they worked their asses off and they still don't have the minimum GPA. So they're going to get cut off the bat from sororities that would be a good fit for them.
Yeah, there should be some opportunity to provide some context.
Yeah, and we do, like we as a company, we help people provide that context, but that's if they're our client. I mean, I can't solve that for the world. I help our clients say, okay, this is how you do this. This is who you reach out to, and you explain. I don't think it always does it for them, but it may, but at least we know that that's an option to, we know who to reach out to, which is usually, and there's a great exception form on a lot of Panhellenic websites, but I don't know if that is being distributed to the sororities themselves. And that's a very good, I'm really glad to hear about that Common App thing, because I'm going to go on, handle it. I'm going to make it my mission. What I need
So question for you, are those GPAs the same from school to school, sorority to sorority, or are they can vary?
It depends pretty much across I will say, so for instance, I'm going to use Auburn because I keep using Georgia. Auburn, the average GPA of the incoming class of 2028 is 4.2 on a 4.0. And so you're not getting into Auburn with something that's going to affect your ability to rush. Nobody with a 2.9 is getting into Auburn, period. I mean, again, never say never, but I haven't seen it happen. So that's not going to affect them. But some schools that are still a little bit more academically less rigorous, I just completely double whatever that word is. So yeah, the schools that are still less academically rigorous to get into, it does become a factor. So, University of Alabama is one of them. You can still get into Alabama with less than a 3.0. So then that becomes, but then I will say that they are used to seeing lower GPAs. So it does affect that. But then there are sororities nationally who, like I know Chi Omega nationally will say, we don't take anybody below a 3.2. And so that's not taking into effect. And I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong. It's their standard. That's something that's very important to them. But so it doesn't really matter what school you're going to. Chi Omega is saying 3.2 is what you
Interesting.
need. Yeah. So it does vary sorority to sorority, but it does not vary as much school to school, except for the ones where it's easier to get into, I guess is the right word.
Yeah, and that's a great message to send to high school seniors their spring semester, because there is something called senior slide where they get into their number one college and they check out academically.
Oh, and yeah, I remember it. I was a whole high school slide, but so what does that mean?
Yeah, so basically once they get into college and then January, they get in, they find out, say mid-December, and they're like, I'm good, I'm in, and now I'm going to sit back and relax.
Yeah, and if you do that and then you tank your GPA, you're done for.
Yes.
Unless you have.
And it happens. It happens. Your offer can get rescinded, but I didn't know that, if your GPA sinks too low, that it could impact your ability to rush.
Absolutely, yeah. And that is very unfortunate. But I do, like I said, to repeat myself, I do really like that's on the Common App. And I'm going to make it a mission, as I said.
Yeah, great.
So is there any other challenges, anything interesting that you see in your job that's possibly changed or anything? I mean, you don't have to have anything.
Yeah, I think that the test optional landscape has changed things a lot. So students, because of COVID, so many colleges went test optional, which gives students an opportunity to decide, do I want to submit my scores or do I not want to submit my scores? And it's had an unintended consequence of artificially inflating those SAT and ACT ranges at all of the schools across the country.
Wait, so what does that mean?
So what that means is at said school, the average SAT pre-COVID might have been a 1,200 to a 1,300. And now it's a 1,350 to 1,500 or 1,490. So kids are working really hard to get great test scores in order to submit them. And what they could have submitted a couple of years ago, now they can't submit because it's not in the range, and they don't want to submit if it's below that mid 50% range. So that's changed some things. But in
Yeah.
Georgia and Florida and Tennessee, they've required test scores for quite some time now. So things haven't really changed much there. But that's changing. But some schools are bringing testing requirements back. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out over the next year or two.
Wow, yeah, and that's another way that we correlate. So many things change year to year, and so you've got to be on top of it. And you definitely have done your research, just like you did your research to be here today. I was so excited. She's like, I listened to your podcast and I watched Bama Rush. I was like, wow.
Oh, you were so cute. You were so cute.
I am so cute. If we can take nothing else from today, it's that I'm very, very cute. And
yeah, it was great.
Since this is audio only, y'all just going to have to trust me on that. I'm very cute. But no, that's, it's, again, I'm struck by the correlation and I'm struck by how much you have done to make sure that you're doing everything you can for your clients. And I feel like if I had a child that was going to college, you would be my first call.
Oh, that is so sweet.
Well, and it's also just because you're have the exact same philosophy as me. So
yeah, no, we do. We want our students to feel, we want them to be happy, and we want them to feel empowered throughout the process and confident. And again, rejection's going to happen. It's a part of life. It's a good lesson to learn how to bounce back and pivot and move forward.
And I think you're also touched on another point. These kids haven't had that much rejection. I remember when I first had children, my mother-in-law gave me the book, The Blessing of a Skinned Knee. And that stuck with me. And I'm not saying I did this. I don't even know, but it just means that you got to have a little failure along the way so you can handle it. Because I see, like, I talk about this complete meltdowns when people get cut from a specific sorority, and that's just not realistic. And you're not going to go through Rush unscathed. And just like you're saying, you're not going to go through this process unscathed, and being able to handle it is very important. And
absolutely.
I also see one more thing that came out of COVID is these parents, and I felt the same way, so I am totally not throwing stones. They saw their kids miserable and they saw them suffering. And so now they want to do anything they can to make sure that doesn't happen. And if that means paying for me to help their daughters get in a sorority, whereas before they might have thought it was frivolous, now they're like, I want to do everything I can to make sure that they have success. And there's a lot of pressure on us. I feel a lot of pressure when I'm having to explain to parents, okay, she got cut, but it wasn't a great fit and she's got some great options left. But it's also, I'm sitting there with a pit in my stomach thinking, oh my gosh, like this has got to work out, because I'm feeling that pressure too. So I get it. And we just want our kids to be happy and well-rounded and healthy. And it's scary to be a parent in any of this time, or any time. I'm a complete anxious mess all the time anyway, but it's a tough thing to do. And it's tough as a third party to have that pressure. And I don't know if you feel it, but I do.
I think it's important for parents to make it really easy for their children to know that they are loved regardless of where they go to college.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Really make it easy for them to know that. Time and time again, be careful about the language that you use when you're talking about colleges. That's a good college. That's a bad college. Oh, you want to go there?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So even the language that you use around talking about college with your children, I think is important. And happiness is key, because I've worked with students before who are suffering from depression or anxiety or eating disorders. And when you as a parent are having to deal with that with your child, where they go to school all of a sudden becomes a very, very low priority, and happiness becomes a number one priority. So you want your kids to be happy. And maybe it's at a school that maybe it's just, you were hoping that they would go to your alma mater and they're not going there, but that's okay. They're going to forge their own path. And all the research shows that it's not about where you go, but it's about what you do while you're there. And how did the student, when you talk about future success, the things that have been shown to correlate with that, it's academics, like how did you do at college? What were you involved in? Did you participate in research? Did you have a relationship with a professor? Those are the things that really correlate to future success, not where you go.
Absolutely. And I feel like if you're miserable at one school and you would be happy somewhere else, it's also not, I mean, I don't know if I should say this, but you think about transferring. If you're somewhere and you're miserable and, it's about finding happiness and growing and learning while you're there. It's not about graduating saying I went to Harvard. I'm just using Harvard because it's not about that. Because if you're miserable at Harvard, guess what? And if you're really happy at University of South Carolina, then you're going to have much more connections coming out of South Carolina than you are coming out of Harvard. If you're sitting in your room miserable, but you can say you went to Harvard, that's not
100%.
Not going to translate to success at all. Wow, I think you are amazing. Like I said, you'd be my first call, and you are the person that I recommend. And
oh, well, thank you.
The people that we have sent to you are super happy. And so, last order of business, unless you have something else you want to say.
No.
Okay. Last order of business. So Bama Rush Talk popularized the hashtag OOTD, outfit of the day. For Mad Rush, I'm repurposing this hashtag OOTD into observation of the day. So what is Nicole's hashtag observation of the day?
Okay, so as I mentioned, I have 2 college-age boys, and my youngest had some of his friends over last night. Our town does this big 4th of July celebration. I don't know why it wasn't scheduled on the 4th of July, but it ended up getting scheduled like on Saturday. Then there was rain, so they rescheduled it. So we celebrated 4th of July last night.
On the 7th. There you go.
On the 7th, which is awesome. It's like the never-ending holiday. So his friends came over. These are his high school friends who came over beforehand. And I was looking at them, and they all have the exact same haircut.
What?
And then we go to this big, 4th of July celebration last night with thousands of people. And literally every young man between the ages of 15 and probably 22 have the same haircut. Have you seen it? It's like...
No, what is it?
It's like fluffy on top and super tight on the sides. And it has taken, I think, the nation by storm. And they look like a herd of alpacas. And I see you in my clients,
now
too.
Now that you say it, I can picture it. Yes.
Yes, like the fluffy top.
Oh.
It's like the Rachel, right? Like the Rachel when I was like in college.
Alpaca.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what they call it, but it's super cute. Cute alpacas, for sure. Super cute.
That's awesome. Yes, there's also something that I don't even know if it made the cut. There's a thing called ferret hot. Do you know what that is? Like, do you know the actor on The Bear?
Yes.
The
chef?
The chef, he's ferret hot.
What does that mean?
He looks kind of like a ferret, but it's hot.
Oh, like the beady eyes?
Yeah, exactly. Ferret hot and packs of alpacas. So that's hilarious. But
yeah, I know it's super deep today.
Yes, that is a deep observation. And I think, but I mean, again, you've done all the research. You've done all the research. So a non-deep observation is awesome. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you being here. And if you guys want the best educational consultant, just Google Nicole Busby, educational consultant. And
oh, yeah. So you can reach me at nbusby@dunbarconsultants.com. That's NBUSBY.
Reach out to her and she will be in your corner, which is half the battle.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Welcome to Time Out with Trisha. Because can you really give advice if you don't speak about yourself in the third person? I don't think so. This is exactly how I speak to my clients. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. Now let's get into it. Okay, so when you're going through rush, you're going to have to cut sororities and you're going to be cut. You need to know this is going to happen and be prepared, but inevitably, it's a tough thing. So this is how you're going to pivot during rush. When you get up and you get this piece of paper, actually, it's not a piece of paper anymore. It's on your phone, and it's going to say the sororities you are asked back to that day, and you're going to be sad. I would say 95% of people are going to be a little bit taken aback, especially since the whole nature of rush is for the sororities to show you how much they love you, and you're doing the same. And so they're really good at it. So they're going to be like, oh, I love you so much. I love you so much. And then you're going to wake up and you're going to not see them on your card or, again, on your phone. So here's what you do. You take a minute to be sad. This is your 10-step program that you're going to do, and it's going to be hard, but you're going to have to dig deep, and you're going to do it. Number 1, take a moment to be sad. 5 minutes max. You're about to have to get ready to put on your best self for your first party. So let yourself feel these feelings you're having for 5 minutes and realize they're just that, feelings. And also realize you're not alone. This is happening all around you. Even if you think nobody else is getting cut, they are. Number 2, compartmentalize these feelings in a bubble over your head and blow the bubble away. Number 3, take 2 big, deep breaths. And this is my personal thing that I do in life, and I think you should do anytime you are upset or confused or having a bad day. Wash your face. Ice cold water. Even if it smears your makeup, you can fix that. Splash some water on your face, look in the mirror, fix your makeup, get going. Promise yourself that you will smile and be brave. Everything happens for a reason. Repeat this and face this day with this attitude. Number 6, there are endless possibilities available to you. Open your mind to these new possibilities and put your best self out there. Again. Number 7, it's time to redirect. Act upon your new intentions. Show the sororities you have left that you're interested in being there and want to meet them. You don't have a choice. Number 8, do not talk about rejection with others. Be positive and uplifting. Others are going through the same thing, like I said. What will set you apart is how you present yourself when the going gets tough. Number 9, give grace to others who aren't handling their situations well. Don't give advice. Just listen with grace. And remember, above all, that you are worth this effort. You are not less because you're experiencing something that every single person faces in their lives. This does not diminish you, nor does it reflect on who you are as a person. Rush is a superficial, tough process, and you are worth the effort of getting through it to find your people. Someone recently asked me how she could know what the sororities were like before she went through rush. She wanted to research, know their reputations, and figure out what would be a good fit with her before rush. No, hard pass. You have to keep an open mind. 1, because you could possibly get cut from these ones that you think are a fit. And 2, you're selling yourself short and them short if you don't try to get to know them during rush and find out what they're about without preconceived notions. Keep an open mind. That is crucial. And that's it for Time Out with Trisha. We'll see you on another episode of the Mad Rush Podcast.